Mother-in-law treats her daughter-in-law like a maid throughout the entire pregnancy, but when the husband finds out, he does something completely unexpected. Donna had always known she would never be welcomed in Stephen's family. From the very beginning, Mary made it clear that she would never accept her as a daughter-in-law. Her disdainful gaze, venomous words, and constant coldness were proof enough. For Mary, no woman would ever be good enough for her son, a man with a promising career in the army, disciplined and responsible. Even so, Donna endured it all, believing that, over time, her mother-in-law would change her mind. Her love for Stephen was stronger than any hostility, and nothing would make her give up on the relationship. But then came the discovery of the pregnancy, which brought immense joy to the couple, but also an unexpected challenge. Stephen would need to be away for months on a mission, leaving Donna alone. He knew his mother had never shown any affection for his wife, but he believed that with the arrival of a grandchild, everything would change. No grandmother could ignore that bond, and as rigid as Mary was, Stephen trusted that she would take care of Donna. Convinced this was the best option, he insisted that his wife stay at his mother's house during his absence. Donna heard her husband's words and tried to believe them. She wanted to think that this time things would be different, that the pregnancy would bring some kind of closeness between her and her mother-in-law. But deep down, she had a quiet fear. Something inside her told her that this plan might be a mistake. Yet she loved Stephen and didn't want to disappoint him. Even with her uneasy heart, she agreed to the idea. On the morning of Stephen's departure, Donna woke up before dawn. Her heart heavy, her eyes filled with tears, but she forced a smile to avoid worrying her husband. He was finishing packing his bag, his shoulders tense, his gaze avoiding hers. Neither of them wanted to talk about the fear they felt, about the uncertainty of the coming months. "Are you sure you'll be okay?" Stephen asked, adjusting the strap of his bag and turning to face her. "Yes, love. It'll only be for a little while," Donna said, trying to sound cheerful. Stephen cupped her face in his hands, studying every feature of her face as if he wanted to memorize the image before leaving. "If my mom does anything that bothers you, let me know. I'll call. I'll handle it." "She won't do anything," Donna said, trying to convince herself. He sighed and pulled her into a tight hug. "I love you. I love you too." Soon after, Stephen walked down the stairs with heavy steps. Mary was waiting for him at the door, arms crossed and an impassive expression on her face. "You're already late, Stephen. Don't keep your team waiting." He nodded, gave Donna one last look, and left. The sound of the car engine fading seemed to echo in the house's silence. As soon as he disappeared down the road, Mary turned to Donna with a completely different look from the one she had when facing her son. "All right, now that the nonsense is over, you can stop standing there and do something useful." Donna blinked, confused. "What? You heard me," Mary said, walking around the room and adjusting a vase on the table. "If you're going to live in my house, it won't be for free. I've spent years listening to you pretend to be perfect, but now let's see what you're really made of." The young woman felt a knot in her stomach. "I can help with whatever is necessary, but—" "I don't want to hear excuses," Mary interrupted her, turning sharply. "From now on, you'll take care of the house, wash the clothes, clean the floor, cook. I'm not going to serve a lazy woman." Donna hesitated. She was pregnant, always tired, but she knew arguing wouldn't lead anywhere. "Okay," she murmured. The first day was just a warning of what was to come. As soon as the sun rose, Mary entered the room without knocking, ripping the covers off Donna. "Get up. The house won't clean itself." Donna sat up slowly, still sleepy. "But it's still early." "Early?" Mary laughed derisively. "If you're going to be a mother, you need to learn to be strong. Now get up and start working." And thus began the endless days. Every morning, Mary gave her a list of tasks that seemed never-ending. Wash clothes, scrub the floor, cook, organize the house from top to bottom. If Donna hesitated because of fatigue or nausea, her mother-in-law would cross her arms and say coldly, "If you can't handle it, you shouldn't be pregnant." Donna tried to hold back the tears, tried to ignore the growing exhaustion. Each movement became heavier as the weeks passed. Her back ached, her legs swelled, and the nausea didn't stop. Still, Mary showed no sign of concern. At night, when Donna finally lay down, she would grab her phone and send messages to Stephen. "I'm fine, love. The pregnancy is going well. Your mom has been really helpful." The lies were necessary. He couldn't know the truth, not when he was so far away, facing his own challenges. One morning, while scrubbing the kitchen floor, a dizziness hit her hard. She stopped, breathing deeply, trying to shake off the sensation. Mary watched from the table, drinking coffee. "Don't tell me you're already tired." Donna held onto the counter. "I just need a minute." "A minute, nothing. Finish it quickly." "The house won't clean itself." She closed her eyes for a moment, then went back to work. There was no choice. The days dragged on, turning into weeks. With each day, the weight of the pregnancy increased, and Mary's cruelty became more evident. "You're taking too long to wash those clothes. I'm trying, it's just the pain in my back. Lazy, that's what it is." The pains in Donna's belly began to become constant. Sometimes, while washing the heavy sheets in the sink, she would feel sharp pangs, but she never said anything. "If you're having a baby, you need to stop being so weak," Mary would say every time Donna hesitated. Time passed, and Donna became weaker. In the final days of her pregnancy, the contractions started early. "I think something's wrong," Donna said, holding her belly. "That's nonsense," Mary said, not even looking at her. "You're just overreacting." "I'm not. It hurts. If it were really bad, you wouldn't be standing there whining. Now finish the dishes." "All right," Donna murmured, swallowing hard and going back to scrubbing the dish with trembling hands. Later, while washing clothes, Donna felt another sharp twinge in her belly, as if something inside her contracted tightly. Cold sweat trickled down her forehead, and her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the sink. She took a deep breath, trying to shake off the sensation, trying to convince herself she could keep going. Then, suddenly, a searing pain cut through her abdomen like a sharp blade. Her whole body stiffened, and her legs gave way. A groan escaped her lips. Her fingers released the wet clothes she'd been holding, and she clung to the sink, trying to keep herself upright. "Mary?" she whispered, her voice weak, trembling, a cry for help, stifled by the pain. From across the room, Mary didn't move. She kept sitting, busy smoothing the tablecloth, as if nothing had happened. "What now?" she asked impatiently. Donna closed her eyes for a moment, trying to control the wave of pain that threatened to overwhelm her. "It hurts so much." Mary huffed and finally stood up. "I told you to stop with the drama. Every pregnant woman feels discomfort. You're no different." The pain grew even stronger. Donna felt a chill run down her spine, and her body started to give out. "Please," she whispered, desperate as the tears burned her eyes. But Mary just muttered something inaudible and turned her back, disappearing through the door. Donna tried to hold on, but she couldn't. Her strength gave out, and her legs finally buckled. The world spun around her, and everything happened too quickly for her to react. A scream got caught in her throat as her knees hit the hard floor, and a shock of pain shot through her body. Dizziness overwhelmed her. Her vision blurred, and everything dissolved into emptiness before she could call out for help again. The first thing Donna saw when she opened her eyes was the white ceiling lit by cold lights. The smell of disinfectant surrounded her, and for a moment she didn't know where she was. Her body felt heavy, her head throbbing, and a dull pain spread throughout every part of her being. Then she turned her face slightly and saw Stephen. He was sitting next to the bed, holding her hand between his eyes fixed on her face with an expression of relief and worry. His face was tired, as if he had traveled for hours without stopping. "Donna," he said in a low voice, gently squeezing her hand when he realized she had woken up. She blinked a few times, trying to adjust her vision, until her gaze focused on his. "Stephen." Her voice came out weak, hoarse, as if she hadn't used it in days. He leaned closer, running his hand through her hair gently. "Thank God. You're awake." She furrowed her brow, confused. She looked around and finally realized where she was. What happened? What are you doing here?" Stephen let out a heavy sigh, as if he had been holding a weight in his chest for a long time. "You were unconscious for hours. A neighbor found you collapsed on the porch, fainted next to the sink. He called the ambulance, and the hospital contacted me as soon as you were admitted here." Donna felt a shiver run down her spine. "So it wasn't a nightmare. I caught the first flight as soon as I found out. I got here as fast as I could," he said, his voice heavy with concern. She stared at him for a moment, processing his words. "But your job? You can't just drop everything like this." "I spoke to my superiors before coming. I explained the situation and they understood," he answered, holding her face in his hands, his dark, intense eyes studying every detail of her. "Nothing is more important than you." Donna closed her eyes for a second, trying to absorb everything. Her heart raced, and a suffocating fear overtook her. Her body was weak, but something inside her screamed the question she hadn't asked yet. "The baby," she whispered, opening her eyes again. "How is he?" Stephen breathed deeply and shook his head. "They haven't told us anything yet. They did several tests, and the doctors should come talk to us soon." The air suddenly seemed heavier. Donna placed a hand on her belly, feeling a pang of anguish. She tried to focus on anything other than the emptiness that was starting to spread inside her. Then Stephen's expression changed. His face, once filled with worry, now carried a different light in his eyes. Something Donna recognized immediately: anger. "But now I want you to tell me what happened," he said, his voice low but firm. "Why were you lying there, fainted on the porch? Where was my mom?" The question broke something inside Donna. She took a deep breath, feeling the tears rise uncontrollably. "Stephen." Her voice faltered, and the tears began to fall down her face. He squeezed her hand, encouraging her to continue. She swallowed hard, and with a choked voice began to tell him everything, from the day he left, every cold look from Mary, every order, every exhausting task, how her mother-in-law treated her like a maid, demanding she clean, cook, wash everything without rest, how any hesitation was met with disdain. She woke me up early, no matter if I was nauseous or tired. If I didn't do things fast enough, she'd call me lazy. If I tried to rest, she'd make me get up. Her voice wavered, and she closed her eyes, reliving every moment. Stephen said nothing, but his expression changed with every word. His eyes darkened, his breathing became heavy. "I wanted to tell you so many times, but I knew you were far away, that you needed to focus on the mission. I didn't want to worry you." "Donna," Stephen said, his voice filled with a weight she didn't recognize. She ignored him and kept going. "And today, this morning, I was already feeling pain. But she wouldn't let me rest. She made me keep washing the dishes. I told her it hurt, but she said it was nonsense, so I kept going. I didn't want to argue anymore." The fury in Stephen was palpable. His jaw was clenched, his fists balled, and he hardly blinked as he listened to her. "I was on the porch, washing heavy clothes, and then the pain came." Her tears fell uncontrollably now. "I called for her. I begged for help. She She just looked at me and said I was exaggerating. Stephen held his breath. His face turned red. She left me there, simply turned her back and walked away. The rage exploded inside Stephen in a way he could no longer contain. This woman... He stood up abruptly, breathing deeply, trying to contain the fury that threatened to consume him. I swear to God, Donna, I'll fix this now. She grabbed his arm with trembling hands. Stephen, please! She left you alone on the floor! He exploded, looking at her with eyes shining with rage and pain. You could have died, Donna. Our baby. The bedroom door opened at that moment, and the doctor walked in holding a clipboard. Stephen turned his face immediately, trying to regain control of himself. The doctor looked at both of them, assessing the situation before speaking. Mrs. Donna, Mr. Stephen, I know this is a difficult time, but I need to inform you about her condition. Stephen breathed deeply, running a hand over his face. Just say it. The doctor consulted some papers and then looked directly at Donna. She suffered a collapse from extreme exhaustion. Her body was overwhelmed, and her blood pressure dropped drastically. The tests showed signs of severe dehydration and anemia, as well as a high level of physical stress. Donna nodded slightly, trying to absorb everything. The doctor fell silent for a moment, as if gathering the courage to continue. Then he finally said, Unfortunately, the baby didn't survive. The world stopped. The air was sucked from the room and everything seemed to freeze. Donna blinked as if she hadn't understood. What? The doctor lowered his head. The excessive strain, the stress. It was too much for her body. I'm deeply sorry. Stephen took a step back as if he had been punched in the stomach. Donna, on the other hand, couldn't react. She couldn't breathe. The baby. Her baby. A sound escaped her throat and the tears fell heavily. She instinctively held her belly, but now it seemed empty. Stephen dropped to his knees beside the bed, burying his face in his hands. The room was filled with a heavy silence, broken only by Donna's desperate sobs. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched her belly with trembling hands, as if she could somehow feel something that was no longer there. The pain was suffocating, unbearable, and every breath seemed to tear through her chest. Stephen remained on the floor beside her, motionless, in silence. His gaze was lost, his face hidden between his hands, his shoulders tense and shaking slightly. He wasn't crying, he wasn't speaking, just absorbing the pain in cruel silence, as if still trying to comprehend the weight of what they had lost. Then the doctor took a deep breath, looking at both of them with a grave expression. I'll leave you alone for a while. His voice was soft, respectful. If you need anything, call the nurse. They didn't respond. There were no words, just raw, unbearable pain. The doctor hesitated for a moment, then turned and left the room, gently closing the door behind him. The next minutes were filled only with Donna's muffled breathing and the weight of guilt growing in Stephen's chest. He remained there, motionless, fists clenched, jaw tight. Every muscle in his body seemed rigid, as if he was holding himself back from exploding. Finally, he stood up. It's my fault, he said, his voice hoarse, carrying a weight that seemed to sink him. Donna blinked slowly, as if she had just managed to snap out of the shock, and looked at him. Stephen shook his head, stepping back as if he couldn't bear to face himself anymore. I knew my mum never liked you. I knew she treated you coldly, never accepted you, but I never imagined she was capable of this. No, Donna murmured, gathering the strength to speak. You're not to blame, Stephen. He laughed bitterly, his eyes burning with rage and anguish. How can it not be? I insisted you stay there. I believed that because you were pregnant, she would treat you better. I left you alone with that monster. Donna closed her eyes, breathing deeply to hold back the tears. It's not your fault. It was her. Only her. You never could have imagined something like this. Suddenly, Stephen's demeanor changed. The sadness was swallowed by something darker, more intense. His fists clenched so tightly that the knuckles turned white, and his breathing grew heavy, irregular. His eyes, once filled with tears of pain, now burned with contained fury about to explode. "She will pay." His voice came out low, almost a growl, full of hate that seemed to boil inside him. "That monster I once called my mother will pay for what she did to you, for what she did to our son." Donna widened her eyes, alarmed. She tried to sit up a bit, but her body was still too weak. "Stephen, please, not now." Her voice trembled, choked with tears. "Don't do anything in the heat of the moment. Let's think." "Think?" He turned to face her, incredulous. "She made you suffer, tortured you for months. You almost died, Donna. Our baby died." His voice faltered at the end of the sentence, but he took a deep breath, closed his eyes for a moment, and tried to compose himself. Donna gripped his hand tightly, desperate for him not to leave with that blind rage. I know, but please, you just received this news. Don't go now, not like this." He leaned over her, holding her face gently despite the evident tension in every muscle of his body. "I have to go. I need to look her in the eyes and make her understand what she did." She shivered. "And what will you do?" "Don't worry about that," he said, his voice lower but still full of rage. "Just promise me you'll stay here and rest." "Stephen." She tried to insist, but he pulled away carefully, freeing himself from her touch. "I'll be back." That was all he said before leaving the room, almost running, leaving Donna behind with a tight chest and a bitter feeling. Back at Mary's house, the door was thrown open violently, slamming against the wall. Stephen entered like a storm, his eyes flashing with fury, his chest rising and falling heavily. Mary, who was sitting in the living room, looked up with a disdainful look. "What kind of lack of manners is this, Stephen?" she said calmly, adjusting a shawl on her shoulders. "Is this how you enter your mother's house?" Stephen didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe deeply. He just took a few more steps, feeling the floor shake under his feet with the rage growing inside him. "Don't you dare call me son," he spat, his voice full of venom. Mary raised an eyebrow, but maintained her impassive expression. "What's all this drama now? You came to complain because your wife couldn't handle the difficulties of a pregnancy." That was the last straw. "You killed my son!" Stephen exploded, his scream echoing through the house like thunder. For the first time, Mary hesitated. "You have nothing to say," he continued, advancing on her. "She trusted you. I trusted you. And what did you do? Turned my wife into a servant, ignored her pain, denied her rest. And when she was about to pass out, you just turned your back." "She's always been weak," Mary answered coldly. The coldness in her voice made Stephen lose control. "Weak?" he laughed, but it was a bitter, dangerous laugh. "The woman who carried my son, the woman who endured every humiliation from you without telling me anything so I wouldn't worry. That woman is weak?" Mary crossed her arms. "She exaggerated everything. I just taught her that life isn't easy. If she had been stronger, none of this would have happened." Stephen tasted bitterness in his mouth. "You're a monster," he said, his voice now lower but still filled with venom. "I'm your mother." "Not anymore." Mary's eyes widened slightly, as if, for the first time, she felt the weight of those words. "I'll take this look of coldness off your face," he said, his tone deadly. "You will pay for everything you did." He turned and left without looking back. That same day, Stephen reported Mary for abuse and negligence. The investigation was quick. Doctors confirmed Donna's severe exhaustion, malnutrition, and extreme stress levels that led to the loss of the baby. Neighbors testified to the neglect, reporting how they saw her day after day, working without rest, visibly weakened. The evidence was overwhelming. Justice showed no mercy. Mary was convicted and faced the grave consequences of her actions. When she heard the sentence for the first time, her unflinching expression faltered. For the first time, the haughty look was replaced by something she had never shown before: fear. The coldness she always exuded gave way to desperation. Days after her arrest, Stephen decided to visit her, not because he felt any compassion, but because he wanted to see her in that state, defeated, humiliated, suffering the consequences of what she had done. When he entered the visitation room, he found Mary sitting, her hands trembling on the metal table. As soon as she saw him, her eyes lit up with hope. She stood up a little, adjusting her shoulders as if she still tried to compose herself in front of him. "Stephen," she said, her voice full of urgency. "My son, I knew you would come. I knew you." "Don't call me son," he cut her off, his voice icy and firm. She blinked, surprised by the harshness in his tone. She still tried to keep her composure, but the tension in her face betrayed her. "You need to get me out of here," she said, forcing a pleading tone. "All of this is an exaggeration. That woman turned you against me, distorted things. You know I just wanted the best for you." Stephen laughed, but it was an empty laugh, without humor. "The best for me?" He leaned forward slightly, looking her in the eyes. "The best for me would have been to have my wife and my son alive and well. But I don't have that option anymore, do I?" Mary's eyes widened. "Stephen, please. I'm your mother. You're nothing to me," he shot back without hesitation. "I only came here to see you pay for what you did, to see with my own eyes that you're finally feeling at least a piece of what you caused." She tried another approach. The anger and superiority were replaced with a sorrowful tone, almost desperate. I can change, Stephen. Forgive me, I was wrong, but I'm your mother. You can't just abandon me." "You were dead to me the day you killed my son," he said, his voice as cold as ice. Tears streamed down Mary's face, but Stephen didn't care. For the first time, it was she who was begging, but to him, it no longer mattered. He stood up slowly, pushing the chair back calmly, without rushing, without hesitation. He looked at her one last time, not with anger or hatred, but with absolute emptiness, as if he were looking at a stranger. "And this," he said, pointing at the uniform she wore, the cold, oppressive environment of the prison. "This is so much less than you deserve." Then, without another word, he turned and walked out, not looking back. Mary stayed there alone, her eyes filled with tears, feeling the weight of reality falling upon her. For the first time, she understood there was no turning back. She had lost everything. Time passed, but Stephen never mentioned her again. For him, Mary ceased to exist that day. He and Donna slowly rebuilt their lives, despite the pain that never fully left them. The loss left marks, invisible scars, but together they found the strength to move forward. Donna, in time, began to smile again. She still carried the pain of the loss in her heart, but she learned to live with it, turning it into a memory, not a burden. She and Stephen supported each other, finding new dreams, new purposes, never forgetting what they had gone through. As for Mary, she was forgotten. Without her son's respect, without her freedom, without anyone to mourn her existence, time consumed her, and the woman who once thought herself untouchable ended her life in solitude, reduced to nothing. And so, justice was served. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, give it a like, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. See you in the next story.